Hey y'all, who dat and what is up? I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold, and it's going to be kind of a special edition of Inside Black and Gold. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it's a different face to my right, left, whatever direction I need to be looking at. It's there. That is Deven Johnson. He's senior at UNO. You know, we're going to be doing some special projects over the course of this offseason, some special podcasts, and this is going to be the first of that series. I'm excited about it. Deven, how you doing this morning?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm thankful to be here, Jeff. Certainly, you know, it's a great opportunity to get on, talk some ball with a fellow ball knower, as people say nowadays. But no, I'm definitely excited. So I'm looking forward to, you know, the opportunities coming.
I appreciate these. You know, last year I was visiting home, my family in Connecticut, and I went to the local bar, and, you know, I was watching the NCAA tournament. It was around this time of year. And, you know, we were all just watching and everyone was gambling on the game. Right. You know, and I was just, I can't remember what I said, but some like college kid looks at me and was like, you know, ball. And I was like, it was the best compliment I've ever gotten from some random like 19-year-old who I'd never met. And I was just like, thank you. I feel like I do. Anyway, so that's where we are. And, you know, it's NCAA tournament this year. As, you know, people on this podcast know, I'd love to sit here and brag about UConn, but they lost. So we don't need to get into too much of that, but
yes. Okay.
yes. So there's stuff to talk about, but not for me.
Hey, I was going to say though, at least McNeese, they were able to make headway. They got their first NCAA tournament win in school history. Will Wade, who was the former LSU head coach, who is now leaving McNeese, he was able to lead them. And I think that was tremendous, seeing that. I go to UNO. We are unfortunately a part of the same conference as McNeese. So I had to feel the angst of realizing that my team could have been in that same position. But I will say that was an early highlight of the NCAA tournament.
Go Pokes. Yeah, no, and now Clemson gets to deal with Will Wade more because he's going to NC State. He's
going to NC State.
So
that's going to be amazing.
They get to score 13 points in the first half of more games.
Yeah.
What a wild. I think they had like 50 points in the second half, but 13 in the first half. Like I feel like high school teams can do that. Anyway, it's not what we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
As you know, I could sit here and do a college basketball podcast. I'm not going to do that for the sake of our listeners. But what we are going to talk about today, we're going to get into, you know, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to get a lot of your takes on the offseason so far. So that's going to be kind of the first segment. Second segment, I was out at LSU's Pro Day yesterday. I have some thoughts. Will Campbell's arms magically got longer? How did that happen? We can talk about that. Was he on the stretching machine? You know, maybe that's why it didn't work out, because his arms were artificially Anyway, that's a whole different animal. We are going to talk about it. I want to talk about Mason Taylor. I want to talk about where the Saints have been, because they were kind of all over the map yesterday with all those pro days. So we'll get into a lot of that stuff. But, you know, first things first, I just want to get kind of your take on the offseason, because in this podcast, it's kind of just me and Steve kind of bouncing our own thoughts off of each other and saying, I agree. You agree. Great. Let's move on. Right. Well, what has been your take? What has been your read of the offseason in general? How do you feel as a Saints fan? You grew up here, you know, in terms of, you know, you experienced the Drew Brees era. You maybe didn't necessarily get a ton before that, but now we're kind of moving past that. So how are you feeling about this team right now? Is there optimism? Is there frustration? Where are you personally?
I would say, first of all, this is an intriguing offseason, to say the least. We are entering, I feel as though we're entering a new era. There's optimism for me. There's optimism. Why is there optimism for me? Two very baseline facts. We have a Super Bowl winning head coach. We have a Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator. I don't really know when's the last time the Saints can say that, you know, that they acquired that, you know, to become the new leaders of their team. So that's where my optimism starts. I believe in Kellen Moore. I like the fact that we have a former quarterback as our head coach. I like the fact that he's coming from a winning organization. I think that the Eagles have set a standard for team building, and I think that Kellen Moore undoubtedly benefited from that. I think that we're going to see a new emphasis as far as our team, and I'm excited for those things. So honestly, I have a lot of excitement. Now, my only question is this the offseason that we're going to use to start the rebuild, or are we going to just try it out one more year with the last of the cogs that we have on the team? That's my one question. But regardless, I would say within the next 3 to 5 years, I'm extremely optimistic about the guys that we have leading the ship.
So are you old enough to remember Kellen Moore at BYU?
I am. I really am. Yes. Yeah. Yes. He played in like that Andrew Luck kind of era.
Yes.
Like, yes. I remember those days.
You know, and I only ask because it's, to me, Kellen, you know, one of the reasons I think the Saints are operating the way they are, which is, you know, they're kind of trying to thread the needle, right? Yeah. Of trying to stay reasonably competitive while also not being, okay, let's go all in, right? And you know, I think part of that is like Kellen Moore doesn't know how to not win, right? Kellen Moore has won at every level he's been at, whether it's high school, winning state championships, whether it's in college. He has the most wins of any NCAA quarterback ever. That record still stands, you know, whether it's at the NFL level, where even, you know, even with the Cowboys, like people aren't in love with what the Cowboys have done in the postseason, but they won a lot of games with him as their offensive coordinator. That's now true. The Chargers didn't go well. But, you know, goes to the Eagles and wins a Super Bowl. I don't think that it's in Kellen Moore's DNA to walk into his first head coaching job and just accept a scenario where, yeah, you're probably going to lose 15 games, right? Even though he probably could get away with it, because they're not going to hold him to a standard of like, you know, you are in a position where you better go win right away, the way Dennis Allen kind of felt like he was.
Right.
You know, so to me, like, I think to your point, like, why do I feel like should be a little bit more confidence in this team than what it's being painted to be? Is like, I don't know, Kellen Moore's a winner. And that's the opposite of what I would say about Dennis Allen. I don't think it's fair to call him a loser, but statistically.
But I was about to say, objectively, statistically, you're telling the truth. I mean, he didn't win when he was the leader of the Raiders. You know, and he wasn't able to. We did have one winning season, the 9-8 season, but outside of that, you know, his history followed him. You know, and sometimes I feel like you have to kind of take note of that. Yeah, you know, maybe you can make the case that during his Raider tenure, he may have not have had the best, you know, the best deck of cards handed to him. But I thought
you were going to go with Carr. I thought you were going to go with the Carr pun, but you stayed away from it, and I respect that.
I missed it. But I will say, like, as far as the Saints, he had some things to work with. I feel like as far as Dennis Allen too, like I think he struggled being me and you were kind of just talking about coaches being disciplinarians. I don't know if Dennis Allen was that guy to put his foot down when he needed to be. And that's important in the locker room. You need to have players that respect you. You need to have a voice that demands and reaches out to players. And you have to be accountable. You know, you have to be accountable yourself as a coach. I think players respect that. But then you have to hold other people accountable. So as far as Dennis Allen, I feel like, you know, those are some things that I saw in him that maybe was a problem. But, you know, for Kellen Moore, he's going to have to learn those things now. He's going to have to learn, okay, now I'm in a position to where the entire team is looking to me in terms of leadership. I have to hold myself accountable, not just the offense, you know, but again, winning culture, winning, you know, since for 10 plus years now, he's won as a player, as a coach, as an assistant. So there's just a lot more confidence that is exuded, you know, to me out of Kellen Moore than a Dennis Allen.
Yeah, you know, I agree with you, and we'll see how that goes. Like it's all you know, first impressions right now when we're saying, hey, this is going to work out. Maybe it doesn't. But, you know, when it comes to Dennis Allen, you know, one of the things that really stuck out to me over the 2.5 years that I've, you know, watched him be a head coach, and I don't know how it went with the Raiders. There's a lot of stories told that it didn't go well, whatever. Dennis Allen always had this facade that he would put out of being like a tough guy. Like if you didn't know any better, he always had a kind of a scowl on his face, and he was kind of short with the media, but like in his core, he is not that.
Yeah.
He is way more of a softie than I think a lot of people realize from the outside, and I just don't think he demands you're coming out, you're following Sean Payton, who is the opposite of like, if you get on Sean Payton's bad side, he's going to send you out of town. Like you're going to be on the Patriots and we're going to draft Ryan Ramczyk, right? Like don't get on Sean Payton's bad side. I don't care who you are. It's not going to go well for you. Like I kind of felt like DA was a bit of a pushover in that way. And that's why you end up with a scenario of Mike Thomas being Mike Thomas, right? Yeah. Like of Marshawn Lattimore walking out of meetings and stuff like that. Like that's how you get to that point. Yeah. Is you are not real with people. So I think we can move on from there, but I agree with you 100%. Like that's one of the reasons I feel a little more confident in the Kellen Moore era, because I think he's going to be able to come in and understand that a little bit better than DA, because I think DA was put in a difficult situation, and it's not a situation you should have put him in, but that's where you were. Moving on, beyond Kellen Moore, what would you say, your favorite move of this offseason, and what's your least favorite move of this offseason?
I would say it might be an unpopular opinion, but my favorite move of this offseason has to be the re-signing of Chase. Coming into last year, I really did believe that Chase Young could potentially revitalize his career down here in New Orleans. Chase Young is someone who I've watched since his days at Ohio State, and hindsight is 2020. So watching him playing alongside Nick Bosa, I thought he would be the better pro. Nick Bosa's been the better pro, but Chase Young has every attribute possible that you would want out of if you could build a prototypical DN, that's the guy you want. I remember the first time I saw him in the locker room during OTAs, and I'm like, wow, this guy, like when you see Chase Young stand next to Cam Jordan, it's a noticeable difference. Like Cam Jordan, he's a big dude, but Chase looks like he gets after it. And last year, I think, the statistical numbers maybe didn't supplement everything. He only had 5.5 sacks. He did play, I want to say, at least 14 to 15 games.
He played all 17 games.
Oh, he played all games. Yeah. Okay, he played.
I don't think he even appeared on an injury report, which was actually pretty remarkable when
you consider,
what his career has been. Yeah.
Okay. So he played all games. He had 5.5 sacks. And I want to say he was 7th in pressures. He was top 8 for sure.
Top 10, somewhere 10. In that range. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a pretty good stat. I would say one thing too that I saw as far as like visually, some sacks he just didn't finish. I think Chase Young easily could have maybe had, 8, 9 sacks had he just finished some. So I like that we established one position of need. In the current climate of the NFL, you need athletic defensive ends. And I would say that's been our one bane, is that we have this stigma of big, tall, more run-stopping oriented defensive ends. And you just got to move away from that. You have to move away from that. If you look at the Eagles, they got guys like Nolan Smith. This dude looks like a safety, out there rushing the passer. Sure. But it's extremely effective because guys are looking to escape the pocket now. So I like Chase Young. I like his skill set. I like the production. I think the production can get better. Maybe Staley can extract more out of him. That's my number one signing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a good one. I think it'd be easy to say Justin Reed. It's a position of need, but Chase Young's 25.
He's young.
Like it feels like he's older because he's been in the league. We've been talking about him since forever.
Yeah.
But he's 25 years old, and if this had been a situation to me where, like you mentioned, like he was healthy all year, and that wasn't a given. Like he signed a 1-year, $13 million contract in part because he had to have off-season neck surgery, and you didn't know what you were going to get out of him. They put all those incentives in his contract thinking, okay, well, if it doesn't work out, we can get some of that money back. He earned all of them. He played in every game. So there's one thing, like I feel good about his health. Second thing, like, and this is just from, I think he's committed. I think he likes it here. I think he's working hard. And when you have, I think that's the issue. I've always said this about Clowney. Like Jadeveon Clowney could have been as good as he wanted to be. Mm-hmm. I just never got the impression that he cared all that much about being any better than he was going to be walking onto the field day one. I can do this physically. And like, there's a story about it at South Carolina. He was there. The coaches were getting on him because he wasn't doing his workouts. And then he went in and he set the school bench press record and walked away like, all right, let's talk later. Like that's how clown he was. And I just think, it would have been easy for Chase to walk in and do the same thing. But I think with the injuries, I think he got he's kind of got a chip on his shoulder now that never existed before because it didn't have to, because he was always that supreme athlete. So if you're getting a guy at 25 in his prime, has figured out what he needs to do to keep his body right and is doing the work, yeah, why wouldn't you sign that guy? And then you add to the fact that like there's pass rushers out there making $40 million a year.
Thank you.
You're getting this guy for 3 years, $51 million.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a pretty good deal to me. Like I agree. I think that's like people are just kind of in the gear of being angry about stuff right now.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a scenario where he goes out there and makes that $17 million a year contract look like a steal. And it's also worth noting, like the Saints couldn't stop the run at all last year. You're not getting a ton of sacks when you can't stop the run.
True.
Like you can't get a sack when they're running the ball for 8 yards on first down. And in third and short, they're not holding onto the ball long enough for you to get a sack. So
yeah,
I like that take. I like your take. Let's move on to, okay. What'd you hate?
Hate is a strong word. I will say
this is a podcast, man. Hate is where we live.
You're right. We're in a world of extremes. I hate, since we're using this term, because I guess I could go there. I hate the Brandon Cook signing. Okay. I mean, it's a reunion that felt a little unnecessary. We're at a time right now, we need physicality in our wide receiver room. Chris Olave, we make the joke about it every year, but the guy literally is maybe a hit or two away from having to potentially really look at his career. He has 4 documented concussions, maybe 5, going back to Ohio State. So that's pretty serious. He's not the biggest guy. He's pretty gangly. He's a great receiver. I love his skill set. But he's objectively injury prone. Rashid Shaheed, I love Rashid Shaheed too. I think Rashid Shaheed, people don't really value his hands maybe as much as they should. Some of the big plays that he had last year really came courtesy of him making a miraculous catch. Derek Carr would heave it up. He's catching it in between 2 guys. Sometimes he would have to decelerate, still make a concentration catch. So I like Rashid Shaheed, but Brandon Cooks, it didn't feel like we needed him. We don't need him. Veteran wide receiver presence, sure, but in terms of the production, is Brandon Cooks giving us more than an MVS? I can't really say, and then it's just about the longevity. Brandon Cooks himself, he's getting older. He's 32? He'll be 32 this upcoming season. So I just feel like we could have really went elsewhere as far as the wide receiver position. But, I'll accept it. I'll acquiesce, but it wasn't ideal.
It's a good use of acquiesce. Yeah, it is interesting because MVS signed a 1-year, $4 million contract.
$1 million.
Could have probably brought him back. I think, it's funny because we talk about Cooks as a reunion with the Saints. I kind of feel like you bring in Brandon Cooks because Kellen Moore wants Brandon. If Kellen was like, MVS is the guy I want, probably could have gone and got MVS. The only positive I'll say, like $6.5 million in general, it sounds like a lot until you look at, Stefan Diggs is just 31 years old, coming off an ACL tear, signed a $23 million per year deal. Cooper Kupp hasn't played more than 12 games since 2021, signed a $15 million a year deal. I don't know what Keenan Allen's asking for, but I would guess it's more than 6.5. So that's the only reason, like, as someone who wanted the Saints to operate as close to the line of reasonability as possible, knowing that, like we said, Kellen Moore is not going to want to come in here and lose games. That's the only reason I'll sell it, is like, hey, $6.5 million for a veteran wide receiver, which I would argue you needed. I would have preferred a Keenan Allen, but I would argue you did need somebody to be, unless you really love Cedric Wilson. So Yeah, I mean, I can understand why people are griping about it. It's just funny to me because I think in general it's looked at as a reunion. Like we're bringing him back, kind of like Jimmy Graham, right? Like you brought Jimmy Graham back as kind of a mascot for the season, right? To get fans excited. It wasn't about talent. It was about, hey, we can get Jimmy Graham back. Great. I don't think this is the same. I think this is more about like if you took Brandon Cook's name off of it and said, what do we need? A veteran wide receiver. This is our price point. Who can we go get? 31 years old, has skins on the wall. That's a Bobby Abreu thing. I need to stop saying it. But it's like, that's what it is. And I think if you just like erase the Brandon Cooks of it all, I think the conversation would be different.
Yeah.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you feel about that?
In terms of if you erase the Brandon Cooks and you replace it with who?
Anybody. 31-year-old wide receiver, 6th 1,000-yard seasons.
Yeah, I think that's literally what it is because see, when you were talking, it's not necessarily the player that's the problem. It's the skill set and the archetype of player relative to what we need. Brandon Cooks, it's not a question about whether he's productive. He is when he's healthy, he's productive. And he also has had that ability to be productive regardless of the situation that he's in. In LA, he was productive. In New England, he was productive. Early for the Cowboys, he was productive. And obviously for us with Drew Brees, he was fantastic. So I don't think it's a question about his production, but it's his archetype. We need a guy that's a little bigger. And then too, when you look at what they're playing, what he will be playing, he's primarily probably going to be a slot guy. I would much rather have a guy like Keenan Allen playing in the slot for us, considering the skill set that we have on the outside and the speed that we have on the outside. So I think if anything, that's it. I think financially it is definitely justified. Brandon Cooks for $6 million a year in comparison to other guys. Relatively we're spending 1.5 mil more than MVS. And I would say overall he's better than MVS, but again, it's just about the archetype of player. I'm taking a 6'4", 4'3" guy who can be a deep threat, over a 5'10", maybe, he's declining into the 4.4s or whatever. And I think that's just it. We're in the time right now in football where positional versatility matters. And I would say Brandon Cooks at this stage doesn't offer that as much as some other guys. Even Cooper Kupp, for example. I think Cooper Kupp, even within his age, you can still say, okay, this guy can mimic a number one on outside. And then within the slot, he's a nightmare, to match up against.
Yeah, so. I think you nailed it, right? Like if your goal is to get speed, then why didn't you just go get the 6'4" guy? Right? Who liked it here?
Exactly.
That's the part that doesn't make sense to me.
Who still feels like he has something to prove, too.
Yeah. No, and he has juice. He has gas in the tank. He's got juice.
Right.
That's the one that maybe he likes Clint. Maybe he wanted to go and hang out with Clint. I don't know. Maybe he likes the Pacific Northwest. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah. And I do think it was unfair because hate is a strong word for any move in the Saints offseason because they haven't done anything really to hate. Like it's hard to hate a move when you don't really make any aggressive moves. And that's kind of, I think if I hate anything, it is how unaggressive they were at the wide receiver spot. Yeah. But hey, maybe that's because they have big grand plans at number 9 overall to go get a big guy. Right.
We'll see. I'll be honest. I hope that wide receiver isn't on the radar, but I'm becoming more accepting. All right. Can I speak about one more signing though?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because maybe this isn't one that I think this is the most trivial signing, and that's the signing of Juwan Johnson. We signed Juwan Johnson to $35 million.
3 years, $30 million.
3 years, 31.
30. I think
30.
Justin
3 years. Okay, 3 years, 30. Yeah. I don't hate the signing. I don't love it. I think Juwan Johnson he's a questionable piece. I think in terms of like current tight ends, he's not a top 10 tight end, but he has a skill set. Again, like we use the word skill set a lot. I think even with like current NFL scouts and GMs and stuff like that, they still like to see potential in some guys. I think Juwan Johnson has that air about him, like that he hasn't fully unlocked his potential. And I kind of see it. I feel like to say that he had his best season last year, I don't think it was consistent in terms of the production. It would be kind of splashy. He would have a big week here, a big week there. I question, what would Juwan Johnson look like if we were to consistently see him get, 5 targets a game on a week-to-week basis. So I say that to say, I like it because there might be some potential within a new scheme with the new offensive leadership in Kellen Moore and Nussmeier. Also considering we have a coach who he used his tight end. Dallas Goedert, when he played us, he torched us. Yep. So, there's hope there. But I know a lot of people don't care for the Juwan Johnson signing. I just say that, I like it because I do think that Juwan Johnson is pretty talented. He provides some athleticism at the tight end position. He is a willing blocker at times. So we'll see how it turns out. But I just wanted to talk about it because I think a lot of fans, they aren't too high on it.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And my issue with how a lot of people are approaching it, and I appreciate the way you approached it, is people are talking about the contract as if it's him getting paid for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's him getting paid for the next 3 years. And to me, you can't make a case for whether it's a good value or not a good value until you see how they're going to use him. And if he continues to get 60 targets a year, then no, it's objectively not worth it. But if you look at how Kellen Moore has used his tight ends, and, we talked about, hey, the Saints don't have a physical chain mover type guy. If Juwan Johnson becomes that guy, if the offense features him to the stage where you're getting in the area of 90 targets and you're looking at a top 10 level production, then sure, it's a great value. He just has to deliver on it.
Yeah.
But no, I that's exactly it. Like, if the Saints choose to use him in the way that you would expect a team to use a guy that is getting paid $10 million a year, then that's a different scenario. Because to this point, they haven't done that.
No.
Even at the level he was getting paid, which is $6 million a year, like he was kind of the afterthought in that offense, at least in the first half of the year when you had receivers. When you didn't have any receivers, you had no choice, and I think he played well. So I'm on board with you for sure. But all right, let's hit the break, come back, talk more about LSU's Pro Day. That was a long segment, so we'll try to keep those well on the shorter side. I always say that, but then I lie to people. So hopefully I can be telling the truth this time. But this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Deven Johnson, new voice we're adding to the podcast rotation. I thought that was a great segment. I appreciate a lot of what you had to say. And so we'll come back. We'll talk more about magically extending arms and go gadget, Will Campbell, stuff like that. This is Inside Black and Gold. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Deven Johnson. Went into a lot of takes last segment. I want to talk about the 4 hours I spent in Baton Rouge yesterday, which, my favorite place in the world. Drive up I-10, hang out in Baton Rouge for, the different universe that is LSU from New Orleans for a couple hours. Hang out at LSU's Pro Day. Definitely not the level of prospects that, you'll see some years. Like, the Pro Day we never got to see was the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Or actually, Jamar Chase wasn't there, but it was Justin Jefferson, Grant Delpit, all those guys. Well, Stingley was a few years later. I actually did get to go to that one.
Okay.
But that was the team. He was on that 2019 team, but he didn't go pro until a couple years later.
Yeah.
Same with Jamar, who opted out the next year. But even like last year, you had Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors. There was really no draw like that this year.
Yeah.
The biggest draw was Will Campbell, who is projected to be a top 15 pick. Now, there's been some variation, and a lot of it's come down to, apparently, for a tackle, he's got these little stubby arms, like 32 inches, 5'8", whatever. But he didn't work out. He chose not to work out. What he did do was get his arms remeasured, and he talked about that in the post-workout press conference. So I want to listen to that and we can kind of weigh in.
How they were measured longer here today?
Well, there was a lot of people at the combine who had messed up measurements. That's why really, you don't really see too much about it other than media people, because nobody really bought into it. And quite frankly, nobody really cares. But yeah, I mean, I knew my arms were 33 inches. Everybody kind of had on every height, weight, wingspan, arm length. Everybody was kind of deducted at the combine. And that's why I measured in again today, even though I didn't do anything, because I knew that that's not right.
What do you make of that whole discussion around you? And I mean, do you feel like it shouldn't matter for your game? I mean, just sort of what do you make of that element of this discourse around you as a prospect?
For 2 years, nobody had any measurements on me, and nobody said anything about my play. So now all of a sudden, an arm length decides if I'm a good player or not. I think it's BS. But any decision makers in the NFL, they don't really care. It's all, people who don't coach, and they don't coach for a reason.
How determined are you to make sure teams know that you can start and play in the NFL as a tackle?
Yeah, like I said, I'm going to play wherever the coach tells me to. But I've talked to quite a few people, and only 2 teams that I've talked to out of everybody see me as a guard, and that's because they already have tackles. So other than that, everybody knows what position I play, and everybody knows my mindset on that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help the team win and, get on the field as early as possible. But everybody knows that I can play tackle.
First of all, love that accent.
Love it. And I was thinking the same thing. So Southern.
Yeah, Monroe, Louisiana. You can hear it. There's a Duck Dynasty thing going on there. Like you could tell. He's, I'm sure he's friends with the family. But anyway, it's interesting. And here's the thing. Yeah, 32 and 5/8 versus 33 inches. It doesn't sound like a ton, and it's not. A lot of teams, they look at prototypes in the draft, and a lot of times you'll say, hey, arms less than 33 inches. Typically, you're not talking about a guy as a tackle. You're talking about a guy as a guard. Now, is that reasonable? Probably not. 34 inches is ideal. But like you said, no one was criticizing his play. And then all of a sudden, well, his arms are short. Oh, no. So it's tough. But here's the thing. You're talking about drafting a guy in the top 10. And that's why I think the conversation becomes the conversation of it's not just, okay, can he play tackle? Is he a top 10 tackle? Or are you drafting a guard way too high? And the Saints went through this, right? Now, Andres Pete had all the measurables, but they drafted Andres Pete to be a tackle at number 13 overall. He ended up being a guard. I don't think anyone complained about it. Well, people did complain about it, but I don't think people from the perspective, hey, we've got a multi-Pro Bowl guard here. It's not a missed pick, but you're not drafting guards in the top 10, top 15. You're drafting tackles. And I think that's the part of it that I have a question about is, are you drafting Will Campbell to be a guard or a tackle? Because I think that changes things. And he did talk about it there.
First of all, to answer your question, I like how Will Campbell answered the question when presented to him. There are only 2 teams who see Will Campbell as a guard. And why? That's because they have tackles. So I think that Will Campbell is a tackle. But I think that Will Campbell is so good that if you are one of whoever those 2 teams were, or whoever else is a team that feels like they're set on tackle and you need him to play guard, I think he's an all-pro guard. I like Will Campbell a lot. I will say that. I mean, it gets to a point where it's like, how much is a matter of an inch or a fifth of an eighth of an inch, or whatever measurement, how much of a difference is that going to make? When I look at the tape, I have seen Will Campbell line up against Shamar Stewart. This dude has Shamar Stewart completely neutralized. You want to talk about measurements? I think that's one of the most confusing things to me. Actually, hear this analogy. People are questioning Will Campbell's prospects based on his measurements. Shamar Stewart is considered a top 15 pick based on measurements. So it's like, what are we really talking about here?
Yeah.
And when those 2 things literally matched up together, the prospect versus the product, the production, the production won. Will Campbell was winning, and he won a lot. He even said that in one of his other interviews. He says, if you get beat as an O-lineman, I think he says you're a plumber. He's like, you never give up a sack, or whatever, you're a first rounder. You give up a sack, you're a plumber. But it's true. And this is a guy that didn't give up sacks. He's technically sound. He's a big guy. He's athletic. He is smart. I think he's able to handle different types of rushers. He can handle power. He can handle speed. Will Campbell is the real deal as a tackle. And, just understanding kind of how O-line dynamics work. Okay, if this guy had to play guard, he's going to dominate. He's playing against less athletic players. He's going to have help. When you play inside, you're helping more. You have the help of the center. He doesn't even need it. He's good on the island. So Will Campbell is 100% a tackle. But if you are a team that is looking to captivate and bolster your O-line even further, he will be a heck of a guard. So I think, wherever you're getting him, you're getting a great player. But again, the tape shows that he's a tackle through and through.
Yeah, I agree with you in that. Like one thing that makes him a little safer to draft is if he doesn't work out as a tackle, you feel like he can play guard, right? And that's something that like Trevor Penning, I don't know, maybe he could play guard, but I don't trust it, And it's funny you mentioned the plumber. It reminds me of Ryan Ramczyk, who was actually looking to be a welder before going to Wisconsin because it hadn't worked out for him. Ryan Ramczyk, just for perspective, his arm length is 33 3/4 inches, which would be more of the prototypical measurements. But like you said, production should outweigh tape measurements. But in college to pro, you do have to, factor in, hey, we're trying to develop a guy, and the ceiling of someone. You can't do everything if you don't have the right measurable. So I get it to some extent. But at the end of the day, I think we're talking about 40 times. We're talking about, okay, can you get out of the blocks? Were you a sprinter in high school? Wow, fantastic, great. It doesn't really translate. Like I want to see guys run 40s in pads. Yeah. How about that? Who's the fastest in pads?
Yeah.
But I do have a question. So just to follow up on that. Okay, so guard versus tackle. Two teams have told Will Campbell, hey, if we draft you, probably going to be a guard because we have the tackles. Do you think the Saints should feel that way about Will Campbell in that we have tackles? We play Will Campbell at guard. Or would you draft Will Campbell to supplant one of those tackles? Like, where would you land if you were the Saints?
Jeff, this is one of the most conflicting topics for me because, okay, first of all, if Will Campbell is there at 9, I want him. But that is the problem. I would say, based off of last year, right now, you might have to put him at guard. And what is the reasoning behind that? So if the Saints were to put Will Campbell at guard, it gives them an insurance policy because I think Talise is a hit. I think he's a sure thing at either tackle spot. He played right tackle in college. He played left tackle professionally, or he's been playing left tackle professionally, I should say. I like Talise Fuaga. Trevor Penning, I was encouraged, I would say, by his improvement last year. I want to say that, he did a great job as a run blocker. He's still improving as a pass blocker. But overall, he wasn't the terror that people made him out to be. He was holding his own, and he looked a lot more confident. So if we were to draft Will Campbell 9 to play guard for us, not only would that solidify our line, that gives us insurance policy on our tackle position because we may have to make a decision down the line. Right tackle and left tackle are extremely expensive. If we are to book in either one of them, it just gives us a lot of flexibility. So if we make Talise our franchise left tackle, let's say Penning gets hurt, Penning doesn't work out, okay, Will can move to the right. Talise gets hurt or for whatever reason we get rid of him. Okay, we move Will to the left. I just love it for the versatility that it gives the line. And if the line is healthy and there's no versatility that needs to be implemented, then we just have a strong front. I love it. I love the prospects of it. So I think Will going to guard, Tally's left side, Will left guard. You got Eric at the center, Caesar right guard, Penning right tackle. That's a solid starting five to me.
Yeah, and it's also worth mentioning, like, they're not picking up that 5th-year option on Trevor Penning because that's going to be like a $23 million a year contract.
Right.
I think this is either the year that Trevor proves, hey, I'm a starting right tackle, or he doesn't.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't, then you'll be right here next year saying, we desperately need a tackle. And maybe you move Fuaga over to right tackle. Either way, you need the starting tackle. So why not get him a year early? And if Trevor does say, like, oh, I am worth extending, then you end up with your, elite left guard, elite left tackle. So I think it's interesting. It's going to come down to whether he's there at 9.
Yeah.
And then it's going to come down to, okay, what's the value of some of these other positions? Because some of these edge rushers really intriguing. A guy who stood out at LSU Pro Day and to me was Josh Williams, who, I just want to give Josh Williams some credit because he went out there and he had a 42-inch vert, which it's like, what?
That's absurd.
Because I've watched Josh Williams for years, and I've never thought of him as like an elite athlete. I've thought of him as kind of a grinder, a physical guy. He ran a 4.45 40. He put up 23 reps on the bench press, which for a running back, to be fair, he's got these little stubby arms. That helps as someone who's benched in his life. I have longer arms for my body that, I got to go farther.
Yeah, it's harder.
So I want to give Josh Williams credit. I think he turned himself into a UDFA. Now, I prior to yesterday, I would have said UFL. So I think that's a big thing for him. Mason Taylor, I thought, also had a really solid day. He was my pick in the last mock draft that we did. What impressed me for Mason is, like, you already knew, okay, he's this really fluid athlete. He can run. He can run all the routes. He can do his thing. Put up 28 reps on the bench press.
Wow.
Which that's my question for him is strength. Is he physical enough? Is he going to be able to go out there and block?
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's a big number. And he looked good doing it. Like, a lot of times you'll see these guys in the bench press in the last 10 reps are kind of like struggle, He was clean through like 25. And then obviously the last few, it's kind of like, oh, let's see how many he can get. But, that was a big number for me because that's a question I have is, can he physically do it? And you'll get stronger at the NFL level. But I thought that was one of his more important metrics, to go out there and show like the strength. And he did that. So, I feel good. If he's there in the 3rd round, I'm taking him. Now, I don't know if he's going to get to the 3rd round, but if he's there at 71, I don't know if I'd pass on him.
I think it would be hard to pass up on him. I mean, first of all, I just wanted to say, I think it's kind of crazy that I didn't realize that this guy was the son of Jason Taylor until maybe about a year or two ago. But when you have that kind of athleticism that runs like in your blood, Jason Taylor was a freak defensive end, by the way. It doesn't surprise me, that Mason Taylor is the athlete he is. And I do think you mentioned the strength aspect. I think it's important that he showed that, because one thing that I think is being devalued is the blocking aspect of tight ends. You have guys like Kyle Pitts that have come in and, you could say he's revolutionizing the position, or Evan Ingram, more so speedy guys or whatever. But it's very important to have a tight end kind of in the mode of like a Mark Andrews or a George Kittle. You don't know what you're going to get out of these guys. They can line up and they can block you, or they can go out and run a route. So Mason Taylor has that versatility. He has great size. I think he's sure-handed. I would like him personally. I really would like him. I just question with the Saints, with our current situation, having Juwan, will we be confident enough, or will we take that risk in getting Mason Taylor?
Well, so no, just to go back to your point, I think a lot of people look at tight ends as just like a big slot receiver, and like that's what Evan Ingram has been throughout the course of his career. And it's like, you don't draft the tight end because they can run routes. You draft them because every now and then you find a Jimmy Graham who was that elite as a receiver that we'll look past the blocking. But even then, he was 6'8". I don't need a 6'4", 250-pound slot receiver. I need you to be able to go out there and block. That's one of the things I like about Juwan is he's a willing blocker. And you don't have to be great as a blocker. You got to get in the way, and you got to be, you got to put the effort in, right? Yeah. And that's what a lot of people are like, oh, Travis Kelce this past year, like, I don't know if he cared enough, like he's got a lot going on. He didn't seem to be, and to be fair, some of these clips in the Super Bowl when they were down 4 scores, like I also would probably be like a little demotivated, but no, I agree with you. The question I have for this year, and it's not just about this year, is for at the tight end spot. It's like, where's Foster Moreau, right? Like, I forgot until a couple weeks ago that he had a knee injury on like the final offensive drive of the season. So where is he going to be? Is he going to be available to start the year? Because if not, then you have a gaping chasm of space available for a secondary tight end. Now, is Jack Stoll going to be that? Maybe he's that blocking guy. Yeah. But I forgot Colorado State tight end from last year. Dallin Holker. Maybe Dallin Holker develops, but I don't know. I think you have tight systems now are kind of getting back to like the two tight ends. So I think you can manage both. Anyway, I don't think that's going to be the reason you pass on him, because even then, like, okay, Juwan has a 3-year contract. All these 3-year contracts are really 2-year contracts with basically a 3rd-year option, right? Yeah. So if the Juwan thing doesn't work out, then you have going into year 3 a younger tight end who you can shift to and say, this is our guy now. Juwan will be 30, so I don't have an issue with that. Just a few more things. The pro day, it was strange because typically, yes, like 2 years ago, Jaden Daniels was out there throwing to Kayshon Boutte and some other guys because these receivers go out there, they want to look their best, so you get the quarterback who throws to them. And so it's not unusual. It gives you kind of a preview for that quarterback. And I remember that year, Bill Belichick was there watching Jaden Daniels, which I thought was interesting. And Jaden goes out, wins the Heisman, ends up being the number 2 pick in the draft, and does his thing. This year, it was Nuss doing that, throwing to Kyron Lacy and Josh Williams. Mason Taylor didn't do those drills. But what was interesting is they treated it like a pro day for Garrett Nussmeier.
Yes, I saw that.
Because they added Chris Hilton and Xavion Thomas and who are the other guys?
Did I see Aaron Anderson run around?
Aaron Anderson and Ballard Sharp, who's the transfer tight end. So, I mean, there was only 2 pro day pass catchers and then 4 just dudes out there running routes, which means it's like, this is not really even a pro day for the Kyron Lacy's of the world. This is Garrett Nussmeier's preview pro day. Yeah. Yeah. And I just thought it was an interesting decision. Obviously Garrett's dad is Doug Nussmeier, who's the offensive coordinator for the Saints. I don't think you're going to go out and draft a quarterback based on, my dad is their offensive coordinator, but it also probably doesn't hurt. And so you had a lot of Saints staffers on hand. Mickey Loomis was there. Kai Harley was there, who's assistant GM. Michael Parrington is the pro personnel director. Ted Rath, who is the pro performance director, the new pro performance director. You also had Brian Young, assistant defensive line coach, TJ Paginetti, run game coordinator. And then there was, Caleb Blanton was the assistant DBs coach. I did that all from memory. Are you impressed?
No, right.
And so like a lot of guys got a good look at Garrett a year earlier than, and he's going to have another pro day this upcoming year. He's going to be in that conversation. I don't think the Saints are going to be bad enough to get a run at Arch Manning or, if you're trying to get into the top 3, but Garrett could be a guy who's there. If you have another year like this past when you win 5 games, you draft in the top 10, definitely on their radar. So I thought it was interesting that LSU chose to do that. And we'll see. Cause I think Garrett's a really good, Garrett is a guy who is a much better pro football prospect than a college player. Right. Like you see a lot of great college quarterbacks who don't make it at the NFL level. I think Garrett is the opposite. The way he plays the position is very pro style. Yeah. And so I think as we get further into this process, he's going to start climbing up boards, even though the numbers might not be, the crazy dual threat numbers that we see from some of these other guys. So yeah, he's a guy that I'm watching close. Like obviously we'll be talking about him all year because he's an LSU guy and he's Garrett Nussmeier or Doug Nussmeier's son. But I think that's interesting.
No, definitely. I did get a chance to take note of Garrett Nussmeier being the quarterback for LSU's Pro Day. And just speaking about Garrett Nussmeier is, I want to say, the kind of quarterback that many people think is antiquated now. But I think he is very successful, or he could be very successful, I should say. Garrett Nussmeier, if I had to give him a comparison in terms of like his skill set and how I kind of see him, he reminds me of like a Matt Stafford. He has a very strong arm. He's like 6'2"-ish. His mobility is better than I think people realize. Like, he can get out of the pocket. He's not a complete statue. But what I love about Garrett Nussmeier is his confidence. He has great confidence in his arm, and his arm talent just shows. It jumps off the page. There's no throw that he can't make. He could rip it 60 yards. He can make the deep out route throws, which are really hard as far as against man coverage and stuff like that. So I think, the only thing that Garrett Nussmeier really has to work on is just his decision making. And one thing that I will say too is I'm a big proponent of quarterbacks who excel despite lacking, I would say, a dominant run game. That speaks a lot to me. People talk about Shedeur Sanders, but people don't realize that Shedeur Sanders played behind a pretty lackluster O-line, and he literally lacked a running game. So what does that mean? When you don't have a running game, you're constantly playing, with long distance. You're playing with 2nd and 8s, 3rd and 10s. The play calling becomes more predictable. So if anything, I felt like, some of Garrett Nussmeier's misfortune would come as a result of, LSU sometimes being in a predictable position as far as play calling or not having that balance as far as the run. But talent-wise, I'm extremely excited for what he can become because, we've seen recent drafts where guys are getting drafted and they can't throw. He can, he's
got the arm talent, no question. I look at him more, it's funny because a ceiling of Matthew Stafford is great. I think Carson Wentz is a guy that I would comp him to. And that's not me being negative. It's like Carson Wentz was great until he had that knee injury. And then something happened and he just never got back to where the Eagles were 11-1, 12-1 prior to that injury. And, and I think that Carson came out with a lot of the same traits of like, he's got to work on his decision-making. And I don't know if he ever did. I don't know if he ever got better at it because that was always the issue with him. So we'll see. This is an important year for Garrett. And yeah, I think that's one of the reasons you won't hear about him as much. One, because everyone's going to be talking about Arch Manning all year. And two, because everyone wants a dual threat quarterback who's going to run for 500 yards. And Garrett doesn't have the arm that, he doesn't have the Justin Herbert arm, right? He doesn't have the arm that's going to blow you off the screen, but neither did Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
What Joe Burrow had was one of the best offenses of all time, and that's when I look at Garrett, I think it's like, if he had Malik Neighbors in that offense, I think that would have been a completely different offense. He didn't, he didn't have Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. He had Josh Williams and Caden Durham and, some of these, Kyron Lacy. Like his top receiver was Kyron Lacy. Like no disrespect to Kyron Lacy.
Yeah.
He's not a pro.
He's not Jamar Chase. Yeah.
Just a few, we mentioned all the guys that were at the LSU Pro Day. There was a lot of Pro Days going on yesterday. Kellen Moore was out at Ohio State. Joel Thomas, the running backs coach for the Saints, was out at Boise State. You can guess who he was spending a lot of time with. Joel Thomas, friend of the program up in Idaho, because he went to Idaho. The Saints have a lot of Idaho connections. Kellen Moore, obviously Boise State as well. But, Joel Thomas, former Vandal, Doug Nussmeier, former Vandal, Scott Linehan, former Vandal up there in Idaho.
Man.
This is what Ashton Jeanty, we're talking about Ashton Jeanty. This is what he had to say when he was asked about the Saints yesterday after his pro day.
Yeah, I've talked to the Saints a little bit. I had dinner with the running back coach last night, met with them at the combine. So definitely been in communication with them during the process.
Much with Kellen at all, or is that
not much with Kellen. More at the combine, he's busy, getting acclimated, getting ready to coach this year.
Yeah, so the Saints are doing their due diligence on Mr. Jeanty. I'm at the stage of the offseason where I'm like talking myself into like, you got to go get Ashton Jeanty. Like I can't help myself. I'm like vehemently against a running back in the top 10. I think it's a mistake that every bad team makes. Is the Giants. I got Saquon Barkley so good. We can't pass on Saquon Barkley. Well, yeah, you just wasted 5 years of his career. Now we won a Super Bowl with the Eagles, right? Leonard Fournette to the Jaguars. Now Bijan Robinson on the Falcons. Like I feel like it's the same situation. But then when you get into that situation, we're like, he's on the board at 9. Can I really say no? Anyway,
okay. I have been around to see the success of all of those guys. I watched Leonard in LSU. I watched Saquon at Penn State. And I also have I recently saw Jeanty this past year. For whatever reason, I still ask myself, is Jeanty on the level of a Saquon? Is he that good? Because
he's not Saquon. He's not. Saquon is one of one. Saquon is not normal. Saquon's an alien. Jeanty is more of in the Bijan mold.
Is he better? And that's my thing too. Okay, so you're 100% right. Saquon is one of one. He's an alien, clears all. Is Jeanty even a Bijan? I feel like
I think he's in that tier personally.
Okay, I mean, I feel like the Saints could get Jeanty, and I do love Jeanty. I like him. Even with the questions, you can't disregard someone's dominance. Jeanty was the bell cow. He was the heart of Boise State's offense. So that's encouraging. If you're drafting this guy, you're drafting a guy who is used to carrying an offense, and that's pretty big. It's not too many top running backs coming in that you can say did that. The Ohio State boys, they split carries. They also had an all-world, roster around them, so it wasn't as much. Jeanty literally was it. So as far as that, I am confident about him, but I just feel as though the Saints have so many needs. And I don't think that Jeanty alone would compensate for other things that we need. Now, considering that we do have a head coach who just won as a result of having the best running back in the league, that does kind of tip the scales. And I think that's kind of the thing in the NFL is like the Super Bowl champion every year resets the mode of, okay, this is what you need for an NFL team. So now everyone's like, we need an O-line with 5 guys who are 6'6" through 6'8", 350 pounds, athletic, with a running back. That's the Eagles. But personally for us, I don't think that we're that. There's certain things within that you need. You need a Jalen Hurts. You need an all-world, duo at wide receiver. So I just think personally for us, I don't know if Jeanty fits our mold, but I do like him as a player.
Yeah, the Eagles also didn't draft Saquon. They went and got Saquon, right? And I think what the Eagles proved is that you don't necessarily have to draft an elite running back. You have to create a scenario where going and signing and adding the elite running back to your equation is what puts you over the top, right?
Yeah.
That's what whatever team ends up signing Bijan Robinson is going to find out. But 2 things. One, I think Jeanty would technically be a Bell Bronco because it's not that's a bad
joke. A Bell Bronco.
Anyway,
I like that term.
It's the question isn't to me. It's like, okay, do the Saints need a running back? Yes, objectively they need a running back. I mean, I like Kamara in this year, but you cannot project much beyond this year with Alvin. Like you got to find another guy in the pipeline. And I don't think Kendre Miller, as much as I like Kendre Miller, I just don't know if you can go into this season feeling like, any level of confidence whatsoever with him staying healthy. Couple other notes from like the pro day circuit, right? So we mentioned Kellen Moore was at Ohio State. Ohio State has those 2 running backs, Quinshawn Judkins, Travion Henderson, who both are very, very attractive prospects. According to Nick Underhill over at New Orleans.football, Saints are also having a dinner they had a dinner with Georgia's players, Micah Williams, Arian Smith, and Dom Lovett, the wide receivers, and then running back Trevor Etienne. Etienne's obviously a Louisiana guy, brother of Travis Etienne. And then at Tennessee, they also had dinner, or they're going to have a dinner with running back Dylan Sampson and defensive tackle Omar Normalot. So, the common thread here is running backs, right? Like you're out at Boise State talking to running backs. You're out at Ohio State. Yeah, you got some other guys there, but two of those running backs are there too. You're getting a good look at them. Dylan Sampson, Trevor Etienne. So like, I think the Saints are in a market for a running back. I'd be very surprised if the Saints come out of this draft without somebody.
Yeah, no, I agree. Me personally, in my mock, I say that we have to nab one of Ohio State's running backs if possible. I like Judkins. I don't know if you played.
I like the hair.
Yeah, I love the hair. And I was going to say, I don't know if you play video games, but, you know, I will tell people he's not going to be spinning like he did in college football 25. But I do think that he'll be extremely effective in the NFL. Judkins is explosive. He's fast. He's strong. You know, I think he has a great balance of attributes that you would want from a running back. And then Henderson, I think he's more of a speed guy. But when you look at the depth of the class, I think that speaks to maybe the reluctance in picking a Jeanty. You know, you have to realize like a top 10 pick is a top 10 pick at the end of the day. Once a guy like an Abdul Carter is gone, he's gone. You know, you're literally fishing to find another guy of that talent, Travis Hunter, et cetera. So the level of talent dwindles, of course, as you get further in the draft. But we're running back specifically, as we just mentioned, you know, teams that draft running backs top 10, the running backs don't even stay. And it's actually, that has been very true. Like when you look at it maybe over the last 10 years, Zeke, Fournette, Derrick Henry, you know, the list goes on.
Derrick Henry was actually the 45th pick. I think Josh Jacobs was a first-round pick. So he's an example of one.
Josh Jacobs, yes. Jacobs was a first-round pick. But even to that point, like, I guess, you know, I was talking to one of my friends about this. I said, Derrick Henry didn't go first round. Do we think Jeanty will be a better pro running back than Derrick Henry?
Right.
I don't think so. I personally do not think so. I mean,
but here's the question, though. It's not necessarily. It's if you redrafted the 2016 draft class, would Derrick Henry be a top 10 pick? That's the actual question. Because at knowing what we know, you wouldn't. Yeah, great. Drafting him number 45, fantastic. But you wouldn't get that opportunity if people knew that Derrick Henry was going to be like the best running back of one of the best running backs of all time.
I would, but there's complexity within this answer. What we have figured out, I think, is that running backs are the ultimate cherry on top to a good team.
Yep. Not
the foundational rudimentary piece to a bad team. And that's it's hard to say, but it's true. A running back going top 10 versus a quarterback going top 10 is a world of a difference. A top quarterback is changing your team day one. Like CJ Stroud showed that. Jaden Daniels showed that. It would be really hard for a guy of any of those guys, Saquon, Jeanty, Henry. You know, I don't think they could bring a team that same success that a guy like Jaden Daniels could, you know, just a top flight quarterback. So I would draft him top 10. But again, personally, I feel as though running backs make good teams great. They don't make bad teams good.
I've said almost exactly that on this podcast. A playoff team plus superstar running back is a Super Bowl team. A bad team plus superstar running back is a bad team with a superstar running back. The Giants proved it. I mean, but they did make playoffs once, and they did beat the Vikings. So I'll give them that.
I did too want to add this too. You spoke about them hosting dinners for some Georgia players and the Tennessee players. I just wanted to say Omar Norman Lott is one of my favorite defensive tackles in the draft. Right now in the NFL, I would say there's a premium on D tackles that can pass rush. The Eagles have somehow literally hit the jackpot on this.
They take all the Georgia players.
They do. They take all of the Georgia players. But, you know, I feel as though he's a sleeper for us. The Saints, we really could use some help, as far as the interior. I like Bresee. I think he's really good. But just imagining Bresee with some help, would be great. So Omar Norman Lott is someone that I really like because of his ability to be disruptive inside and just create, that push and collapse the pocket. I think that's something that we are severely missing.
Yeah, and building through the lines is never the exciting move, but it's almost always the right move.
It is.
So, all right, let's wrap this up. Again, this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. Deven Johnson. We'll be having Deven on a lot more. We're going to do some kind of special projects over this off season. I'm excited about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. You can follow him at Dev John Sports on X, and I called it X. That's like one of the first times I've ever called it X.
I still say Twitter. It will always be Twitter. You can't untwitter Twitter.
It just felt wrong saying it to the point that I had to point it out. I'll start calling it like Zitter or something like that. Exeter. Anyway, okay.
Exeter.
So yeah, this has been fun. I've had a good time. Great points, great stuff. We'll be getting into a lot more as the off season goes on. Deven, you got any parting thoughts before we clear out of here?
No, man. I'm just thankful to be here. I am excited for this upcoming season. Yeah, that's all I can say. I'm thankful to be here. I'm glad, that we're able to converse. I feel like you had great points too. So, yeah, I'm just looking forward to talking more ball.
Good stuff. All right. Who dat? Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to rate, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until the next time, be easy, y'all. Peace.
Peace.